Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, Helen, for that announcement. So yeah, we'll be moving on to our panel called Breaking Into and Advancing Careers in Finance and Consulting. And I'm joined by our lovely panelists, Richie Lou and Richard Lou. Okay, amazing. So I guess I can quickly first start off with a brief introduction of myself, and then I'll pass it on to our amazing panelists. So yeah, my name is Audrey Gong. I'm currently a rising senior at the University of Toronto, and I'm studying finance and economics. And previously, I interned at RBC Capital Markets as an investment banking analyst, and this summer I'll be a summer business analyst intern at McKinsey. So yeah, so why don't we start off with introductions from Richie and Richard, and you guys can tell us a little bit more about where you work, where you went to university, what your career journey has really been like, and also maybe a hobby of yours.
Sure, I can go first. Hey everyone, my name is Richie. I'm currently an engagement manager at McKinsey in New York office. All of my work in management consulting focuses mostly around pharma and life sciences, but just broadly strategy consulting. I went to school at Wharton undergrad at University of Pennsylvania, graduated from there, then worked at Deloitte Consulting for a few years, and now, yeah, as I mentioned, at McKinsey. Been living in New York for a while. I think, honestly, one of my hobbies is just exploring the city. In my opinion, it's one of the, Richard probably disagrees with me, but it's one of the best cities, the best city in the world. And there's a lot of great kind of food and activities to do there, and I just like exploring the city a lot and seeing great new restaurants, new activities, museums, things like that.
Awesome. I really liked New York when I went, but yeah, Richard?
Hey everyone, I'm Richard. I'm currently a private equity associate at Altamont Capital, based in the Bay Area. Went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, studied econ and minored in data science. Right after graduating, joined Morgan Stanley in their investment banking division. Did that for 2 years before joining Altamont. And yeah, one thing I guess I love is golf. Very easy to pick up in the Bay Area. So.
Okay, amazing. So our first question for you guys is, can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly finance and consulting really entails? So in particular, what kinds of roles exist within these industries?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, consulting, for those who are not familiar, is kind of helping companies, in a simple way, helping companies with problems that they themselves do not know how to fix or just can't fix, right? And so we derive value from that by kind of having a lot of industry experience, potentially that we've solved this problem elsewhere for another company, or we've done our own research and have our own perspectives on how to do that. And so basically what our product really is just our people and their brains. And I think the value there is in going to these companies. I mean, typically at McKinsey, we're working with C-suite, CEO level, board level people, and helping kind of solve their biggest problems that they have. Or they just want to hear kind of our insights and advice on new trends in the space, or kind of how they should be thinking about the future, especially right now in such kind of volatile, uncertain times.
Yeah, for us, I think for finance, at a very high level, you can think of it as just the management of money, or as we like to call it in the industry, capital. You know, it's a very broad term, but I think within private equity specifically, we think of it as buying and building businesses. For Altamont Capital, that's typically founder-owned businesses, so a lot of them are pretty well-developed family businesses that have been standing for 30 plus years, for a very long time, but they're just looking for a new partner for their next phase of growth. So we'll come in and we'll be their strategic partners, whether that's on the financial side, so helping them raise capital, raise debt, and then helping to develop a strategy around how do you manage that capital, but also more on the strategic and operational side, where they want to grow into a new market or a new geography. Like, we'll help strategize with the management team. And so for us, you have to wear a lot of hats across a variety of different aspects of running a business. And so I think that's one of the really attractive parts of the industry, is you get to build a very diverse skill set, while also being very deep in the weeds. So you get to build, you're very deep, but you're also very wide in terms of what you're going to cover.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your great explanations of the two industries. Okay, so I know that many of maybe our audience members are interested in recruiting for either finance or consulting. So I was wondering, firstly, as young professionals, like, you kind of have some experience in terms of recruiting. What do companies really look for in that recruiting process? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I can take that. I would say it depends on, so speaking to finance, I think, especially first coming out of college, I would say the number one thing in my experience was just a willingness to learn. It's like a pretty big keyword. I emphasize that a lot in my interviews, but I think that's one thing. Soaking things up like a sponge is pretty huge, but also having that like story of why do you want to get into the field. And for me, the way I sort of developed that was building that story from near the end of my high school. So at that time, I'd started this small like media business in high school, junior, senior year, and then in college, joined various business clubs, finance clubs, consulting clubs, but then building that sort of network that had both alumni network, but also people currently at school. I think that was a really huge part of my college experience, which is just getting to know more people, so that you get exposure to not just finance, but also consulting, tech, various other industries. And then I think that helps to sort of narrow down for you, like, what do you actually want to do? From there, and having that network then allows you to sort of get like an internship throughout, your sophomore or your junior year to actually figure out, like, is this something for me? So me personally, throughout college, I took 3 different internships actually in semester while I was in school. Those are all part-time, and then each of the summers from sophomore and junior year as well. But they were all sort of different types of internships so that I was able to get pretty varied experience. And then when you're in the interview room, you'll typically get asked, what has your story been? Like, why do you want to enter investment banking, or why do you want to do private equity? And all of your experiences so far basically helps to inform that story. So I think that part's pretty big for why do you want to be in the industry, and then just building up your technical skills as well. I think in finance, you'll actually see a lot of people across a lot of backgrounds, and the interesting ones are like humanities backgrounds. In investment banks, I've heard like history majors have gone and interviewed at big investment banks like Goldman Sachs and such, because like the information and what you need to study is actually readily available. It's all public information, and at that stage in your career, like, you're not expected to know super advanced concepts. They're going to ask you stuff that's relatively basic, and it's really just up to you to study that. So I think for me, like, that was something that was, the barrier to entry like was pretty low, and the concepts for me were very intriguing. So I think on one hand you have the story of why do you want to get into this field, and the second side is just studying up on your technicals. I think that those for finance, I think, would be the starting points to break into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, building on that, I think just preface everything, right? I mean, my opinion on both recruiting for consulting and finance is that actually it's very, very trainable. It's very formulaic, right? In finance, you have your technical interviews, your behaviorals. In consulting, it's your case interviews. These things are very trainable, they're very formulaic, like there's tons and tons of resources online to do that. But that's a baseline, right? You want to do that. I think what really, now talking about consulting, what we're really looking for in terms of what the intrinsics are of a person, right, is, I think, number one, just the ability to problem solve and critical think. At McKinsey, right, we use this term problem solving a lot, right? All of our meetings, all of our brainstorming sessions with our partners, we always call them PS sessions, problem solving, and that's essentially what the job of consulting is to be able to solve problems. And not just solve problems that you have experience solving, but solving any type of problem. So a lot of people when they start recruiting for consulting, and as an interviewer for McKinsey, what I notice a lot of people do incorrectly is they try to talk a lot about what knowledge they have, what experience they have, and getting really into like the detailed, nitty-gritty tactical pieces. What I actually care about more is kind of how they think, right? Of course, they're going to know how to solve a problem in their specific field, but what if I put them in a life science client, or what if I put them in an oil and gas client, right? Can they still demonstrate and have the ability to solve their problems and break down that problem on a first principles basis? And so, I mean, that's the crux of a consulting interview, that's the crux of a case interview, because when you recruit for consulting, you're going to get a case interview, and that case interview is almost guaranteed not going to be part of kind of your field of expertise, right? I mean, one of the case interviews I give is about like safaris. Like, I don't think, besides maybe Amy, I don't think anyone else here knows a lot about like safaris or like the wilderness. But I want to like see kind of how you think about solving that business in that space. And so we care a lot about just the ability to be a problem solver, to be a critical thinker, and then of course be a good communicator. And I think a lot of people are daunted by this fact that like, oh, problem solving is such a nebulous, subjective concept, and it is a little bit, but I think you can also kind of train to be a better problem solver, right? And that starts from kind of being involved in consulting clubs or case competitions or just anything where like you really have to crack something under pressure at college, right? And college offers a lot of those experiences, whether it's a case competition, whether it's a consulting club, even like a stock pitch competition where you yourself have to solve a problem that you're given. And I think just more repetition of that just naturally will also build kind of how you're thinking about that and how you're being a critical thinker and how you can actually solve those problems.
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I wish I had this advice when I was recruiting 2 years ago. But yeah, you guys both kind of already touched upon my next question, but I was wondering, did you have any specific advice in terms of the tactics that you personally used when you were, setting yourself up for recruiting in college?
Yeah, I mean, tactically, maybe we start like even just at the very beginning of the freshman, sophomore level, right? I think Richard mentioned that like, you should put yourself out there and like see what is available, right? Join a consulting club, join a finance club, tech club, VC club, whatever, right? And I think freshman to sophomore year is where you really want to just learn and like see what's out there and understand these things. Like I went freshman year in school and like I had no idea what investment banking was, I had no idea what consulting was, and like the first few years was me just to build that knowledge to really understand what I wanted to do. But after that, I think you do want to get a bit more tactical for consulting specifically, right? Like consulting clubs, case competitions are both great resources. Case competitions, anyone can enter them, right? And they're good ways to get practice. Consulting clubs, I know in a lot of schools are notoriously hard to get into. But there are other ways to get involved, right? Like I know just because a club is not a consulting club by definition, there always potentially have opportunities for you to help a local business or help be on a committee for something and even demonstrate leadership ability, because that's what we're looking for, right? And then you come junior year, senior year, or if you're an experienced hire, right? Then like the actual process to prepare for a consulting interview, right? Right, again, very formulaic. I think casing, what I usually recommend is do two things, right? You kind of buy case in point, skim case in point, kind of understand what a consulting interview is, and then everyone's ready, yeah, exactly. And then the other one is I think there's a great YouTube series run by Victor Cheng. It's like an 8-hour long. Everyone, like anyone who's ever wanted to even think about it has done these two things, right? Like go onto YouTube, look at this Victor Cheng kind of case workshop where he literally walks you through the whole entire process of casing. And like what ends up happening is after you do those two things, and then after you practice, is that you learn the script, you know the formula, and honestly, this is something that as an interviewer we like don't necessarily look for, but we can tell who's prepped this way, and we can tell who's not. And like no matter what, that influences kind of how we think about recruiting someone, is because if someone's actually done the diligence and gone through the basic foundational steps, we know that there's someone that we can trust to like do the job, right? And so some people want to riff off of a case method. My recommendation is that really just nail the formula, and it makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, I would echo pretty much everything that you said. I would say one thing that has really helped me, or at least during college, was just the clubs. I mentioned the network before, but I think it's also the training aspect. Some will be more like consulting specific clubs, right? But you also have more broader ones of just like general business clubs, and they'll have people in like everything business, and like think about that on a very broad basis. But then you'll have like trainings for that, which is one of the clubs that I joined. And we were doing that every week. So getting that repetition in of what is the template or what is the formula for how do you interview for banking or private equity or consulting, right? Like it is a lot more formulaic, and you don't want to like hammer home like how do I run a case interview in like the food industry, right? Like you're gonna dig yourself a hole that's not gonna be beneficial for you, but getting that template down and understanding how do you solve a given problem, and it could be a finance problem too, you know, those might be more conceptual, but you'll at least understand the concept behind it and how do you take that apart when you're asked a more difficult question. That's the training that you really get through these sort of clubs. And to your point on, from the interviewer's perspective, you can tell like who has prepped, but you can tell who has prepped the concepts and the ideas underlying the questions that you're asking. And typically your interviewers won't be asking you directly like, what is this specific concept, but they'll mask it behind some broader question, and it's up to you to sort of break that apart and figure out like, oh, it's like this concept that they're asking about. But if you've done your homework, it's actually very easy to figure that out. So I would say, joining those clubs is pretty crucial, and then finding the guides. Like in banking, they have like the 100 questions guide that everyone has seen before, and you study that a couple times, do those problems, like you'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely super helpful advice. So a lot of practice makes really great improvement. Okay, amazing. So we're going to jump into something a little bit more broad in terms of like how the industries work, in terms of corporate fit and how you can really navigate the workplace. So I know that a lot of us are, second-generation Chinese American immigrants. I was wondering, how did you really learn to navigate like the unspoken rules and culture within the finance and consulting industry, and what are like kind of the nuances that you faced within the workplace?
Yeah, I would say from the workplace perspective, it was just also kind of just getting reps. I mentioned I had done a couple of different internships throughout college and across different, sort of fields, right? Like I did a PE internship one year and then a banking one another, but at like different firms, and each firm is going to be slightly different, but you sort of learn and pick up on little things here and there. But my approach was sort of, if I can do my work well and do it on time and also be able to sort of tackle that next thing, how can I make my manager's life easier as well? I think that was a really key winning point for me, to help me stand out, especially within the finance world, because everyone's wearing multiple hats. They have a million things to do, but if you're able to even help just a little bit of your teammate to take something off their plate, that won't go unnoticed. So I think that was big for me. But then just learning from all of these experiences to be able to sort of pick up on like, okay, this is like the way we do things at this firm, but that one way might be slightly different at another firm. And so for the first like sort of 6 months of all those experiences was gathering information of what are the various nuances to this firm and how do they do things, before then, taking that more proactive approach of, okay, I'm gonna now do, my work stream in my own way, but recognizing that if I work with this manager, I might have to tweak that approach a little bit. If I work with someone else, my current approach might work better.
Yeah, I think I actually have a slightly different view of this. I would say that one of the things that I think East Asians, especially in work culture, kind of are known for, just kind of being a very heads down, work hard, kind of don't really like be too disruptive, right? And as long as you work hard and you work super hard, like the success will come. I think that's a lot of how we, especially as kids, are raised, right? And that formula obviously works, right? And for example, in sports, and kind of other careers, I would say in the business world, in the corporate world, it only gets you so far. And I think we actually see that phenomenon where a lot of times in the US corporate America, you see a lot of Asians who are very high performing at the like junior, middle tier level, middle management level, but then as they make it on up towards the more senior executive level, you see a lot of East Asians fall out. And it's actually what's interesting is you see a lot of other demographics continue to move up. Right, and I think one of the big things, my opinion of that is that it is a lot of kind of, we've been taught, and I think probably maybe our parents' generation as well has been taught to just like, keep your head down and just work hard and your success will just come because of the output or the input you put in. I think it more so there's a need for us to kind of learn more about kind of being more assertive, being more self-promoting, being more kind of confident in our own abilities. And like one thing that like a lot of the people that I work with, a lot of people, my analysts that I work with, I tell them is that they need to kind of raise their voice, they need to kind of be more involved in problem solving sessions. Don't be afraid to voice their opinions to a senior partner or partner, because their colleagues who are not East Asian are doing it all the time, and they themselves tend to be more shy about it. I think just broadly, I think just having that ability to be more assertive and to be more aggressive and be more kind of forward with your thinking and thoughts, I think helps go a long way. And I was actually having this discussion actually with my mom recently, right? It's a more macro question. Why are there in the US so many like South Asian and other demographic kind of CEOs and not very many East Asian Chinese CEOs? And we actually looked into this, right? I think it was MIT or it was Columbia recently did a study where they asked a bunch of MBA students, right? Who in their class did they feel would be the most like successful or end up becoming a CEO? That was the question. And who also in their class tended to be like the class presidents, the like class leaders, and more often than not, did a disproportionate level to population. There's a lot of South Asians, very few East Asians. And then they asked why. Why do they have the skills available to be able to do that? And a lot of times, the skills that came up was like assertiveness, self-promoting, proactive, right, things like that. And I think it all actually goes back to, if you think about just even in like the Chinese language, the word, there's no positive connotation of the word assertiveness. Right? I think assertiveness in English can be positive, can be negative. I think assertiveness in Chinese, like I'm second generation, my Chinese is not good, but maybe asking the first gen to think of a word that is a positive connotation of being assertive, and it's probably very hard to do that. And so just culturally from that, like you learn very quickly to just be kind of heads down, work hard, and not kind of promote yourself, speak up for yourself, being like confident, and like, because that's actually a bad thing, to be too loud, to be too aggressive, to be too assertive.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely super helpful advice. So my key takeaway is like you don't only need to work hard, but you also need to make it known that you're working hard.
Yeah, I mean, working hard obviously you still have to do that, right? And especially at an analyst like level, the people who are the most successful are probably the ones who are putting the most time, right? There's also an argument to be made of working smarter, but I mean, as for me as a manager now, and as Richard's moving up to like senior associate VP level, it can't just be working hard, because especially in these roles in consulting and finance, like if you try to put in just the time and effort to make it to the next level, you'll kill yourself. It's just too much, right? And a lot of it ends up being who you see getting promoted ends up being the ones who have their story, promote their story, people around them know their story, and there are people around them who are willing to go up to bat and like promote them because they themselves have been doing that promoting as well, right? And being kind of proud of the work that they do. It has to be good work, obviously, being proud of the work they do, and then letting people know what they've done, why they're of value, things like that.
Okay, great, yeah. No, thank you so much to both of our panelists for your amazing answers. So I guess at this point we can turn the floor on to the audience members. So if anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to raise your hand, and we have a couple of minutes left to answer those. Anyone? Oh. Yeah.
Really good panelists. Richie, this is a question for you. You're in consulting, you're an engagement manager. Do you have specific advice for one, acquiring new clients, and then two, keeping clients engaged?
Acquiring and keeping clients engaged? Yeah. So kind of advice. So for me as an engagement manager, right, you should actually be getting in the transition into building these longer-term client relationships that are beyond just your like single project. And for me, I think the hardest part of it the entire time was kind of getting past that mindset that is transactional. That like, hey, I'm only going to be talking and reaching out to a client because I need something from them, but it becomes more of a starting to build a relationship, right? Getting to like know the client's needs, what's the client up to, right? What are they working on? And for me, learning that like, hey, not every meeting I need to get something out of it. Sometimes just meeting with the person, hearing what they're doing, hearing what's on their mind is enough. And part of it is because you like stay in their top of mind, but two is you just get to know them better. And then eventually you get to help them identify problems that they themselves might not identify, right? And so getting rid of that transactional nature, being more kind of part of that like building that relationship mindset, I think helps a lot. That helps kind of you acquire clients, right? Part of it obviously is that you need to obviously come in and bring in a certain level of expertise so that they trust you, but that trust comes from having that continuous relationship, but also it's that genuineness, right? The clients also need to feel that you're not trying to get something from them, but that you actually truly have their interest at heart, right? And so I think that's key to not only just acquiring new clients, right, but also maintaining that continuous relationship and engagement with them over time. And then sometimes it comes down to making those trade-offs of when do you help them, and obviously you're asking for an opportunity to sell work to them, and when are you willing to just put in the time and effort to do them a favor, right? Because those go a long way, and it benefits both. So I think, yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, I'm still someone who's still learning that skill, but even just in the few years I have started to build these client relationships, that's what's really resonated with me. To the point where, well, some of my clients, I know a lot about their personal lives, because that just helps me become more personable with them. And we'll just catch up, I don't know, every month or so, just for coffee. And sometimes we'll talk about work, sometimes we'll just talk about vacation, and travel. And it all matters. And then also because these clients, they know what's going on, right? So if they truly have a problem that they need solved, they will also bring that up, because you start building that trust-based relationship.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
So you decide as a personal level that you work hard, be more assertive, that can help you to be better and more successful. I'm just wondering, there's a saying that take a minute to research out. I want to ask for your opinion, for both of you. From the whole Chinese American community level, what do you expect that the whole community will do better to support the second?
I can try to take it first. Yeah, I think, obviously, right, I'm very grateful and appreciative of kind of the village that's taken to raise me, right, and obviously, it's not easy to. I think, kind of just thinking through the Chinese community, and again, I like to view it in a juxtaposition to other communities, right? So whether it's the Jewish community or the South Asian community, one thing I've noticed is that even though I think, in my opinion, the #1 driving factor in moving people on up and becoming more successful is probably assertiveness, I think there is also a greater need, I think, within the Chinese community to also lift each other up. I think one thing you notice, McKinsey, at Deloitte as well, is that other communities, when they get promoted, they give more opportunities to people like them. They raise each other up, and they work on building each other up instead of viewing them as competition. I think one thing you see more with Chinese people, especially American Chinese people, is that they are very much kind of focused on their own gain, right? And they're focused on kind of being successful themselves, and then sometimes they actually view other people like them more as competition than as collaborators and as part of the community. And so I think that mindset, and I'm trying to still figure out where that stems from, that mindset is definitely very different, that I think needs to change in order to have a whole community get lifted up.